There are plenty of things to love about modern TV, including an ever-diversifying host of voices, easier than ever access to a range of different series on demand, and bigger budgets leading to a whole load of incredible-looking shows. That being said, there's also a lot to hate too, and I love to complain just as much as the next guy. So I'm Amy from What Culture, and here are 10 things everyone hates about modern TV. 10. Endless reboots, revivals, and spin-offs. There's nothing more indicative of Hollywood's creative stagnation than the higher-than-ever incidence of reboots, revivals, reimaginings, and general spin-offs of recognizable IP. It obviously makes sense that networks would rather produce content within existing popular brands, but never before have studios more aggressively sought to mine their vaults of movies and TV for anything that can be recycled into new content. Disney has certainly been the worst offender as of late, taking decades-old franchises and giving them underwhelming reboots intended solely to pad out the Disney Plus content conveyor belt. Elsewhere, we've seen the likes of Prison Break, 24, and CSI receive belated revivals, whilst Dexter and Law & Order are also getting the same treatment. Now here's a radical idea. How about we invest less in nostalgia bait and more in new ideas? There are plenty of writers out there with great new ideas and lots of new talent to bring them to life. So it would be great if we could sink some resources into that for a change. We could make new classics, new fan bases, some actual new content. But alas, for now, we just have to sit here as Mickey Mouse shoves yet another soulless reboot down our throats. 9. Cancelling shows before they can build an audience. Networks hastily cancelling shows has always been a problem, but it's decidedly more frustrating in the age of streaming, where a show's success and failure just isn't as simple as a Nielsen ratings figure. In the past, a show's ratings were a fair indication of how many people were watching, but in the era of streaming viewership, it's incredibly common for a series to pick up momentum later on. Netflix is pretty well known for prematurely axing their originals after just 1 or 2 seasons, citing that they simply weren't performing strong enough out of the gate. The thing is that this has become a self-fulfilling prophecy, because people are reluctant to start watching a promising new Netflix series in fear that it's going to be cancelled after 1 season like the rest of them. Networks need to understand that many series need time to grow and cultivate an audience, and that not every show can become a Squid Game tier success overnight. I mean, look at the past, for example. Seinfeld didn't become a mega hit until season 4. Obviously, not every show will manage to build a sizable fan base, but such is the gamble inherent in TV production. Make those predictable hit shows, but use them to bankroll the riskier ones and give them the time they actually need to expand. 8. Hyping every new show as the next of something. There's perhaps no single modern TV trend more infuriating or harmful than the desire by networks and media to seek out the next of something. Ever since Game of Thrones became a mega hit, there's been tiresome speculation on what might become the next Game of Thrones, such that practically any fantasy show released today gets saddled with unfair hype and expectations. Can't we just let shows like His Dark Materials and Shadow and Bone be the first of themselves rather than lazily compare them to what came before? And Game of Thrones is hardly the first example. Pundits spent years arguing what the next Lost would be, and the hunt for the next Stranger Things has been going for a few years now. This constant desire to liken a new series to a hugely successful one is depressingly reductive, and at a wider level it incentivizes studios and creatives to just rehash a winning formula rather than try something new. 7. Spoiler culture is out of control. There are few things more annoying about modern pop culture discourse than spoiler culture. It's extremely frustrating to go on social media and be bombarded with high-definition screen grabs and GIFs of major moments from TV shows, somehow mere minutes after they've aired. Basically, if you don't watch a show as soon as it airs or shortly thereafter, the only sensible solution is to stay off social media until you've seen it. But in our world as it is now, is that really practical? Even shows you haven't seen yet aren't safe, with memes and photo sets being posted with exact details of important plot points. It's great to share opinions about shows and discuss media with other fans, but it feels unnecessary for it to be at this level. Even big media outlets have become culprits of spoiler sharing, putting thumbnails and headlines out without a second thought about those who might not have seen the episode yet. Nobody is safe from spoilers of any kind, and unfortunately it seems that there's nothing we can do about it. 6. The tiresome debate over binge versus weekly delivery. One of the most fiery debates about modern TV involves the worthiness and superiority of the two popular delivery models, weekly versus binge. Traditionally, TV shows have been released on a weekly basis, whereas with the advent of streaming came the birth of the binge model, whereby everything is released at once and you can watch however you want. Many of the older generation look down their nose at binge culture, thinking that weekly releases are far superior. But the thing is, both models have their benefits. Shows like Lost and Twin Peaks would have absolutely suffered under the binge model, and this is because they offered a lot to unpack each week, and the discussion surrounding their respective mysteries helped cultivate a larger following. Comedy series in particular, though, are far more amenable to the binge model, because waiting a week to watch a 22-minute sitcom episode feels absolutely agonizing. Clearly, the future of TV lies in variable models, so those who think they're superior and above binging can get off their high horses already. Maybe you could just consider some nuance for once. 5. A lack of one-off shows. Whilst one-off shows certainly aren't unheard of, the general rule is that if a show's first season performs well, it'll be back for another one whether the story needs it or not. By far the most egregious example in recent times is Big Little Lies, a terrifically entertaining mystery thriller show that was milked for a second season it absolutely didn't need. It speaks to the general issue with sequelizing anything. Studios love it because it's less of a gamble than making something new, but that often results in an inferior season 2 that struggles to justify its own existence. For example, True Detective never managed to recapture the brilliance of its first season, nor did Killing Eve. And recently, Squid Game has been confirmed as having a second season, and I literally couldn't be more upset about it. There's a beauty and a purity to shows that do their thing and then just disappear, leaving viewers wanting more whilst preserving their own integrity. It's easy to see why networks won't let a good thing lie, but that doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. 4. The streaming wars. The brutal, bitter irony of the streaming wars is that it's basically just repeating the same mistakes of cable TV. When streaming started to pick up momentum around a decade ago, we all cheered the ability to cut the cord and abandon our linear TV packages. Except undeniably exacerbated by the pandemic keeping us all at home, the last few years have seen every capable network launching its own paid streaming service. The result? Paying to subscribe to all your favourite services like Netflix, Amazon, HBO Max and Disney Plus ends up costing a massive monthly amount, and perhaps no less than what you were shelling out for satellite or cable TV in the past. The sensible solution is probably just to subscribe to certain services for periods of the year when you're most likely to use them. But for a lot of time-strapped people, that's a huge faff that they could just do without. We all thought streaming would offer a utopian, egalitarian future away from the constraints of traditional TV, and though streaming certainly wins on the accessibility front, you're probably not much better off financially. 3. Shows are literally too dark. No, we're not talking about the subject matter here, but rather the literal darkness of the visuals. It seems that so many shows these days are reduced to barely visible ventures into sludgy filmmaking, equating darkness with visual intrigue. One of the most infamous examples of this is Game of Thrones' Season 8 episode The Long Night, where critics and audiences alike complained that the dim lighting meant that they just literally couldn't see what was going on. The likes of The Walking Dead, The Mandalorian, and Ozark have been similarly criticised for their dark aesthetics, such that anyone not watching in a pitch-black room with the curtains closed and their TV settings perfectly tweaked might have an unsatisfactory viewing experience. As with the sound mixing issue in films, it ultimately comes down to the fact that TV shows are graded and edited in extremely sophisticated post-production facilities. But of course, your average viewer has a vastly inferior system to that, which creatives often fail to take into account. 2. The ghoulish true crime documentary boom. If any single TV genre has enjoyed a massive uptick in popularity over the last few years, it's surely true crime. It's never been unpopular, but amid the streaming media boom, glossy deep dive docs about serial killers and so on have become reliable staples for streaming services. Now, there's obviously an audience for this, one which undeniably grew when we were all locked in our homes for a year, but it's also fair to say that so much of the content is majorly lacking in any personality at all. By adhering to the same stylistic tropes over and over again, any merit of the stories being told gets lost as it just becomes another murder doc series to add to the pile. For every Making a Murderer, there are a dozen mediocre replicas. With their huge popularity, the discussion around true crime shows' ethics has also come into the mainstream too. Movies and TV have of course always exploited real suffering since their inception, yet it's never felt quite as gross and calculatedly slick as it does today, as yet another misogynist murderer gets his own biopic series on Netflix. Listen, nobody's telling you that you're a bad person for enjoying true crime, but the same definitely can't be said for the people commissioning the shows. 1. The awful fans. And finally, we come to the be-all and end-all and the one thing that will never ever change about TV. The fans are the worst and also sometimes the best thing about it. Any sufficiently popular TV show is an absolute headache to discuss on social media because the loudest voices that inevitably rise to the top are rarely the most nuanced or engaging. Between the obnoxious memes and the over-invested fans who can't see wood for the trees, discussing any major TV show online is barely worth the hassle. If you want to talk about your opinions and any questions you have about a new episode of a Marvel show, for example, Twitter is not going to be a fun place to do that. Reasonable dialogue isn't easy to find on the internet in general, though you're at least a little more likely to see it in specialized forums and subreddits. But even on there, people can become a little too invested, and these are then the kind of toxic superfans that can't separate the show from reality. You know, the types to send death threats to Asa Butterfield because they didn't like Otis in Sex Education or something stupid like that. For the most part, whatever show you're talking about really isn't that deep, and it sure is exhausting to talk to people that think it is. And with that, we've reached the end of this list of 10 things everyone hates about modern TV. What do you think is the absolute worst part of trying to watch TV today? Is it the streaming services? Is it the fans? Let us know in the comments below. And remember to check out whatculture.com for more lists and articles like this every single day. As always, I've been Amy from What Culture, and I'll catch you next time.